20 fines are to be issued as part of the police inquiry into parties held in government buildings breaking COVID rules. The Metropolitan Police says it won't be naming the individuals fined, but there are likely to be more fixed penalty notices to come.
Number 10 says Boris Johnson has not received a fine yet. Opposition parties have renewed calls for him to resign.
Ukraine says its top priority is to negotiate a ceasefire as the latest round of peace talks begins. Delegates from both sides are meeting in Istanbul more than a month after Russia invaded Ukraine. As President Zelensky describes the situation in the city of Mariupol as a crime against humanity, it is hoped that more residents from there will be evacuated today.
And also on the programme this lunchtime. The Queen and many members of the royal family have attended the memorial service for the Duke of Edinburgh at Westminster Abbey. The head of P&O Ferries says he won't re-employ the 800 workers sacked earlier this month, and that doing so would cause the company to collapse. And the actor Will Smith has apologised to Chris Rock after he slapped him on stage at the Oscars. He said his behaviour was unacceptable and inexcusable.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, all four home nations are in action tonight, with England expected to make wholesale changes for their match with Ivory Coast.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. 20 fines are being issued to people who attended gatherings in government buildings during the coronavirus lockdown. The Metropolitan Police has been investigating dozens of events which may have breached COVID regulations, including some attended by the Prime Minister. More fines are possible, as police say there is a significant amount of material to be assessed. Our political correspondent Nick Eardley is in Westminster this lunchtime. Nick.
Jane, there was huge pressure on the government for several weeks. There were questions over Boris Johnson's future when those reports of lockdown-breaking parties in Downing Street emerged. And at the time, Boris Johnson insisted that the rules had been followed. Today, we found out that the Metropolitan Police have concluded the law was broken. They are going to issue 20 fines, and there could be more to come. Behind these doors, rules that changed lives were drawn up. Christmases were cancelled. We were all told to avoid mixing with friends, even family. But now the Metropolitan Police has decided lockdown laws were broken by people working in government buildings at the time. In a statement this morning, the force said, "We will today initially begin to refer 20 fixed penalty notices to be issued for breaches of COVID-19 regulations." And there could be more to come. The Met added, due to the significant amount of investigative material that remains to be assessed, further referrals may be made.
It's important that justice is done without fear or favour in cases of this nature. And we all want to see people held to account if they've done wrong.
Morning. Is PM going to get a fine, sir? Oh, we'll have to find out.
Boris Johnson hasn't received a fine yet. We don't know exactly who has, but a lot has changed since the Prime Minister said this in December.
What I can tell you is that all the guidelines were observed, continue to be observed.
Since then, there have been apologies and calls for the Prime Minister to go.
I don't think that the man who set the rules and asked the British people to make unimaginable sacrifices and then has been found to have repeatedly flouted them can remain in post. We think he should resign.
But some Conservative MPs have been more reluctant as a result of the conflict in Ukraine. Some of the intense political pressure may have died down in recent weeks, but many Conservative MPs were deeply uncomfortable with allegations of parties at the same time that everybody was being told to stay at home. Those MPs will be waiting to see who is fined and how the Prime Minister reacts. But whatever happens next, one fact has been established today. The police think that COVID laws were broken in some of the very buildings where they were being set. That means difficult questions for the Prime Minister in the coming days about whether he oversaw a culture which allowed lockdown rules to be broken. Nick Eardley, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford is with me, and this investigation is not over yet, Daniel.
No, this is really only the beginning of the latest chapter of this saga. So first of all, these fines are going to be issued, but that'll take a little bit of a while for them to arrive by post, and so we won't even know if anyone is prepared to tell us whether they've been issued one of these fixed penalty notices. We won't know that for a short while yet. But the police have also made it quite clear that there's a lot more investigative material for them still to go through, and it may well be that more fixed penalty notices come out of that if any and more offences meet the threshold at which a notice should be given. And of course, amongst all of that, big questions about whether the Prime Minister himself will get one of these or whether any very, very senior civil servants will get one of these. So we're starting to get the fixed penalty notices coming, but the consequences of that, I think, are still not yet entirely clear.
All right, Daniel, thank you. Daniel Sanford. Well, now we will get the very latest on the situation in Ukraine and cross to Lviv and my colleague Ben Brown. Ben.
Jane, thank you very much indeed. Well, on the battlefield here in Ukraine, the fighting rages on, but hundreds of miles away in Istanbul, peace negotiators are sitting around the table for another round of talks to try to secure at least some sort of ceasefire. It is the first time in more than a fortnight that the Ukrainian and the Russian delegates have met face to face, although expectations of any early breakthrough are pretty low. Well, the latest round of talks comes as Russian military advances in Ukraine have got bogged down. This map shows you the areas of the country currently under Russian control. Now, Ukraine is claiming to have successfully counterattacked in some parts, and it says it has now recaptured the key town of Irpin, which is near the capital, Kyiv. The Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, has said an attack on the southern city of Micoliath has left at least 7 people dead and 22 injured. And meanwhile, Ukrainian officials are saying they hope today to reopen some of the humanitarian corridors which are used to evacuate civilians from the besieged city of Mariupol, which has been largely destroyed by Russian bombardments. Anna Foster has more details from here in Lviv.
On the peaceful banks of the Bosphorus, the talk is of war. Istanbul is the newest location for negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. The security is high, and so are the stakes. In the room, alongside delegations from both countries, the Russian billionaire Roman Abramovich, who it's reported suffered a suspected poisoning during the last round of peace talks. Turkey thinks it can succeed where others have failed and help negotiate a ceasefire.
It's up to the parties to stop this tragedy. It will be to the benefit of everybody to achieve a ceasefire and establish peace as soon as possible. The whole world is waiting for good news from you.
In Ukraine, expectations for these talks are low. They're preparing for a long conflict. These are the men of the Territorial Defence. Volunteers with ordinary lives, they've signed up to protect their country. They're being taught from scratch how to use weapons and repel Russian forces.
For many of them, it is an emotional and quite frightening thing to be doing. They don't know how to handle these weapons. They hope that they'll never have to do it for real, but it's an important part of keeping this country safe. So how did they get on? You're just checking whether they've hit the target?
Yeah, I'm checking how they're hitting the target, and as we see, the distance is pretty far off, but the guys are performing pretty good, especially for the people who are doing this for the first time in their life.
Do you think that helps, the fact that they're not just learning this, that they're doing it for a reason?
Yeah, it always does, because it's the biggest motivation for these people is that their country is in danger. They need to fight for it.
Ukrainians fear scenes like this spreading right across their country. In Micoliath, a Russian strike hit a regional government building. 7 people were killed and 22 injured. In the besieged city of Mariupol, thousands of people are still trapped.
I am saving my things. What else should I do? Nothing is left.
Yesterday, escape routes were closed because Ukrainian security forces claimed Russia would attack fleeing civilians. But today they hope to restart evacuations from this once thriving city that now lies in ruins. Anna Foster, BBC News, Lviv.
Well, let's go to Istanbul and our correspondent Tom Bateman, who is covering those face-to-face talks between Russian and Ukrainian delegates. Any signs of any progress so far, Tom?
Ben, I think these talks are not exceeding expectations, and given that expectations were incredibly low at the outset, that is saying something. In fact, the talks have broken up for today, an hour ahead of schedule, and we had, within the last few minutes, the Ukrainian delegation coming out here. And these, it's been a real rush about the way these things have been put together, a huge amount of interest in what they were saying. And what they have talked about here is their desire for security guarantees. This is almost like a sort of NATO light agreement that the Ukrainians want, whereby the West effectively, and they believe that Turkey would be a key part of that, would guarantee Ukraine's security, and then Ukraine would effectively declare itself a neutral country. Now, they've said that before. They say that they have now reiterated that to the Russian side and put it to them. And in their view, if they can get engagement on that, there would then be the basis for direct presidential talks between Mr. Zelensky and Vladimir Putin of Russia. But of course, that now goes to the Russians. We haven't had word from them on whether they accept that. And we don't even know at this stage whether or not there'll be a second day of talks tomorrow.
Tom, thank you. And let's go to Jenny Hill, who's in Moscow for us. And Jenny, a lot of people here in Ukraine believe that President Putin won't really engage seriously in any peace process until he's got what he wants on the battlefield here.
Yeah, indeed. But first, let me bring you up to date, because we've been hearing from the Russian side, who actually have said that they've decided to drastically reduce what they describe as combat operations in the Kyiv and Chernihiv areas, and that is while Ukrainian proposals, which would be made during those talks, are put to Vladimir Putin. One of those proposals, and this isn't, I'm not sure how verified this is, so forgive me, it's come, I believe, from the Ukrainian side, is a 15-year consultation on the status of Crimea. You'll recall that the Kremlin is very keen to have the world recognise Crimea, which it annexed in 2014, recognised as Russian. So we'll have to wait and see. Either way, it looks as though there has been some kind of movement. Perhaps it's not too much of a surprise, because a little earlier the defence minister here said that whilst the special military operation, as they call it here, is going well, they now intend to focus on what they describe as liberating Donbass, that region in eastern Ukraine, which Russia, of course, wants Ukrainian government to give up control over. So we'll have to wait and see. Ultimately, of course, all this comes down to effectively what one man decides, and that man, of course, is Vladimir Putin.
Indeed. All right, Jenny, thank you very much. Jenny Hill. Well, the United Nations estimates 3.9 million refugees have now left Ukraine. Each one, of course, has their own story, the lives they've left behind, how they've escaped, and where they are now taking shelter. More than 600,000 Ukrainians have crossed the border into Romania alone, and our Central Europe correspondent Nick Thorpe sent us this report from the northeast of the country, where he met Irina and heard about her family and the monastery which has taken them in.
Ihastria. The name of the monastery means a place of retreat, of prayer and meditation, away from the turmoil of the world. And that's what it means now for Irina, her mother-in-law Natalia, her best friend Ira, and their 5 children. Irina drove them all here in her old Ford Transit from Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine.
My lovely car, my lovely van. I'm so glad that here I have a part of home, a part of my husband. Sometimes I want to sit there just to smell my husband, just to smell my house.
Her husband, like Ira's husband, stayed behind in Kharkiv, a city under Russian siege, delivering fuel. Here at the monastery, the families have been given a house and told they can stay as long as they wish.
Last Sunday, when I was praying at the church, I even prayed for Putin. I wished him to become wiser. I wished him stop killing our children in Ukraine. Only here at the monastery, I began to feel some sympathy to Russian troops. And I stopped hating them. Only yesterday I saw some flowers in the yard and I was so surprised because I didn't see them before. It's impossible even to breathe this beautiful mountain air.
When they fled Ukraine, they thought they might be home for Easter. Now their best hope is by summer. Nick Thorpe, BBC News, Sihastria Monastery, Romania.
And that's it from me here in Lviv. As those peace talks continue today in Turkey, so too tragically does the fighting here in Ukraine. Jane, back to you now in the studio.
Ben, thank you very much. Ben Brown. The Queen has joined other members of the royal family at a service to commemorate the life of the Duke of Edinburgh, who died last year at the age of 99. The event was far larger than Prince Philip's funeral, which was held during tight coronavirus restrictions. There'd been uncertainty about whether the Queen would be able to attend because of mobility issues. Here's our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell.
She's arrived at Westminster Abbey on so many occasions for state and national events. This, though, was different, something very much more personal. Discomforts and mobility issues were set aside. The Queen was there to lead the thanksgiving for a beloved husband, the man who'd been a constant presence in her life for their 73 years of marriage. The Queen had made her way to her seat by the shortest route, accompanied by the Duke of York. She joined virtually the entire British royal family, 4 generations, including some of the youngest, great-grandchildren, including Prince George and Princess Charlotte. The only notable family absentees, the Sussexes, who chose to remain in California.
We give thanks for His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. A man of rare ability and distinction, rightly honoured and celebrated, he ever directed our attention away from himself.
The Duke was a champion of young people through his award scheme. One of its gold medalists spoke about its importance.
The world has been through so much turmoil, and in these times it is so important to show our support to young people.
In his address, the Dean of Windsor recalled that the Duke could sometimes be sharp, but no one could ever doubt his loyalty to his Queen and country.
As we give thanks for the life of a remarkable man, perhaps our greatest tribute to him, most especially in these far too troubled times, will be for us to accept the challenge implicit in his life to rekindle in our hearts something of that call, and to pray, as I think he did, for the inspiration and the guidance to play our part, however small, in working for a kinder future.
The service had been a chance denied by the pandemic at the Duke's funeral for family and so many more to come together in tribute. A long life of service had been honoured. For the person who knew that life best, it will surely have stirred many memories and moments of reflection. The service had been a short one. At its end, the Queen left, walking with care, escorted once again by the Duke of York. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
And our royal correspondent Daniela Relf is outside the Abbey. A hugely important day for the family, Daniela.
Yes, indeed, Jane. It was a traditional, restrained, no-fuss kind of service, very much in the spirit of the Duke of Edinburgh himself. And crucially, the Queen was there, as she had so wanted to be, using her walking stick, escorted in and out by her son, Prince Andrew. And that in itself is notable. He is, of course, someone who has caused her a degree of difficulty in recent times. But today, he took his mother to and from her seat inside the Abbey for this service. And it is a show of support for him. This was a public thank you from the military, from the charities who the Duke of Edinburgh worked so closely with. But it was also a decent goodbye for family and friends who hadn't been able to pay full tribute last year or give the Duke of Edinburgh the send-off that they'd wanted.
Daniela Relf, thank you. It is 1:20, our top story this lunchtime. The Metropolitan Police is issuing 20 fines as part of its inquiry into parties held in government buildings breaking COVID rules. Still to come, we tour the newly reopened Burrell collection in Glasgow after its 5-year refurbishment.
Coming up on the BBC News Channel, a busy night of international football ahead. All the home nations in action, with Wayne Hennessy winning his 100th cap for Wales.
The government has put forward proposals for children with special educational needs or disabilities to receive early help from schools in England. It's part of a long-awaited government review which was launched in 2019. £70 million of additional funding is being made available for the measures which aim to put an end to the postcode lottery affecting levels of support. Our education correspondent Elaine Dunkley has this report.
For the ears.
Where's the ear? There's no pins in the ears.
Harrison is 9 years old and has autism. Getting him the support he needs in a mainstream school has been difficult. In one term alone, he was excluded 14 times.
School were terrible. They were sending him home on a daily basis. I was called out of work to go support in school. He wasn't doing any teacher-led activities at all. He was just going in, sitting in a room with 2 teachers on his own.
For too many children like Harrison, there are delays and disruption, with varying support depending on where you live in England. Years of trying to get diagnosis, a lack of funding and navigating a complicated system are all part of the problem. The government is promising early intervention and a national scheme that brings education and health services together.
We propose to establish a new single national special educational needs and disabilities and alternative provision system across education, health and care, setting clear standards for how children and young people's needs are identified and are met.
You haven't told me what you are.
Proposals also include changing the culture in mainstream schools to be more inclusive, with additional training and staff. Schools like this one in Bradford are at the forefront of change. Lillycroft Primary has been part of a trial, bringing together health and local education teams for early intervention.
It would take you between 5 and 6 years to get a diagnosis of autism for children in the centre of Bradford. You would be waiting and waiting and waiting, and sometimes parents would then give up, if you like, because it was such a stressful process. We don't wait anymore, we get the child the help they need, so the gap between the children and their peers is minimised.
Labour and teaching unions agree that change is needed, but say the plans are not ambitious enough to transform a system in crisis. For this family, things are looking up. After battling for 6 years, Harrison has now been placed in a special school in Huddersfield.
The first time I spoke to his new head teacher, he had me in tears. You feel so emotional because, you know, year after year after year you've been told that your child is the problem. Within a couple of weeks of being at a new special education school, he's got everything he needs. You can see a future for him, you can see, you know, potential that wasn't there before, and it's brilliant.
Elaine Dunkley, BBC News.
The Chief Executive of P&O Ferries has told the Transport Secretary that he won't reverse the decision to sack 800 staff. Peter Hebblethwaite has written to Grant Shapps to say that re-employing the workers on their original wages would cause the company to collapse. Speaking this morning, he said he will remain in post.
I have no plans to resign. I need to see this through. I need to get this business back up on its feet. I need to make it competitive. viable and give us an opportunity to grow in the future.
Well, our transport correspondent Katie Austin is with me. This story is not dying down, not going away.
No, indeed, and we've had this war of words, haven't we, between the boss of P&O Ferries and the Transport Secretary. Peter Hebblethwaite also said in his letter to him today that 500 workers had already, or former workers, had already signed settlement agreements. Now, meanwhile, we did hear last night that a second P&O ferry, the Pride of Kent, had been detained following an inspection, a safety inspection by the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. Today, we've learned that the failures that were found included emergency equipment not functioning properly. Now, this lunchtime, P&O Ferries has said that, in its words, it's clear following interventions by ministers and MPs, the MCA inspections have reached an unprecedented level of rigour. It said the additional scrutiny was welcome and that any suggestion safety was being compromised was false.
All right. Katie, thank you, Katie Austin. The actor Will Smith has apologised to the comedian Chris Rock for slapping him during the Oscars ceremony on Sunday night. Smith also swore at Rock, who'd made a joke about his wife. Smith's statement on Instagram came after the Academy Awards organisers said they'd be reviewing what happened to decide whether any action should be taken. Our correspondent in Los Angeles, David Willis, has more.
To do what we do, you got to be able to take abuse. You got to be able to have people talk crazy about you.
Will Smith issued a tearful apology both to the Academy and his fellow nominees on Sunday night, but of one man there was no mention.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it, all right?
Chris Rock's joke about Smith's wife's hair loss led to her husband storming the stage and this slap across the face.
Oh, wow!
And as a stunned, star-studded audience looked on, the actor proceeded to hurl profanity-laden abuse from his seat.
Keep my wife's name out your mouth! I'm going to.
Nearly 24 hours after the Academy Awards got underway here came a direct apology to Chris Rock. Posting on Instagram, Will Smith said he was wrong and out of line. Violence in all of its forms is poisonous and destructive, he wrote. My behaviour at last night's Academy Awards was unacceptable and inexcusable.
Now, at this point, I can only laugh. And y'all know I've been struggling with alopecia.
Smith also mentioned his wife's highly public battle with hair loss, saying a joke about her medical condition proved too much for him to bear. His behaviour on what should have been one of the best nights of his life has been condemned by the Academy, and an inquiry is underway which could lead to him being censured or expelled. Now the party's over, he'll have to confront the growing sense of shock and disbelief over what happened on Sunday night. The slap that was seen around the world is unlikely to cost him his Oscar, but there's a growing feeling here that such a highly public act of violence cannot go unpunished. David Willis, BBC News, Los Angeles.
The Burrell Collection in Glasgow, home to an internationally renowned collection of 9,000 artefacts, has reopened to the public today after a 5-year renovation programme costing more than £68 million. Our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon has been to look round.
Welcome to the Burrell Collection. Welcome back.
The first visitors back at one of Glasgow's best-loved museums, opening its doors for the first time in nearly 6 years.
Looks fabulous, really fabulous. Delighted to be here and see everything they've done.
Gorgeous. I actually really like how you can see the outside as well, like when you're in, it's so pretty.
It's fantastic.
What do you think of the Burrell?
Excellent.
This long renovation has vastly increased the gallery space, ensuring more of the collection can be seen than ever before.
I initially had a list of 800 objects for me to look at and start thinking about conservation treatment. And this is definitely one of my favorite objects. I think it's their facial expressions and the hand gestures. And you can just imagine any kind of group of people, even today, coming together, maybe listening to someone, and the two there in the background look a bit like they're starting to whisper or they have a bit of a gossip.
The museum's walls of glass, a virtue which had also become a challenge. The building had been suffering from the wet West Coast weather. It's now more watertight, less vulnerable to changes in heat. The hope is the collection will once again make culture and history more accessible to all as the country emerges from COVID.
A place like this gives that communal coming together, that we didn't have during lockdown. But the collections themselves, they are the real glory here.
The Burrell is a stunning space in a unique location. With its Persian carpets, Egyptian antiquities, pottery and sculptures, this huge personal collection, gifted to the city many decades ago, offers a unique window on the world. Lorna Gordon, BBC News at the Burrell Collection in Glasgow.
Beautiful. Let's take a look at the weather now. Darren Bett has joined me. Hi, Darren.
Hello there, Jane. It's a bit colder than it was yesterday across the UK. The highest temperatures today are generally across western areas where we're seeing the best of the sunshine. But it's going to get colder still in the next few days. The really cold air, that's just sitting to the north of Scotland. But as we develop a northerly wind, we're going to bring down that cold Arctic air, and that will bring with it some sleet and snow, although given the time of year there shouldn't be too much of that. This is what's happening through the rest of the day. A lot of cloud around. This is where we've got the best of the sunshine out to the west, though some showers are breaking out. Some showers under that cloud across southern parts of England where it's a bit cooler than it was yesterday. But the really cold air is really across northern parts of Scotland behind this weather front that's sitting across here. And that weather front is actually bringing this band of cloud and wet weather southwards across Scotland today and overnight. Some sleet and snow over the hills. Some of that wetter weather arrives in northern England and perhaps into Northern Ireland. Following on from that, this is where we get the Arctic air. We're going to have some ice and some snow in northern Scotland. A frost is likely here. A little bit chilly across some southern parts of England and Wales. If the cloud does break up, it'll leave us with some mist and fog that will slowly clear tomorrow. Could have some sunshine and the odd shower in the southwest. Here's our weather front, the main band of cloud and rain, some sleet and snow over the peaks and Pennines, some of that wet weather heading into Wales, the Midlands and East Anglia. And then to the north, we've got the sunshine and the wintry showers. And tomorrow, it's only 5 degrees in the afternoon in Newcastle. Last of the mild air is across southern parts of England. But that rain that we see there is going to turn to sleet and snow overnight. There could be a light covering in southern England on Thursday morning. Bit of a wintry look to the weather on Thursday morning with a widespread frost and some icy patches around as well. The last of that sleet and snow clears away from the southeast corner of England on Thursday, and then we're all in the same boat. Sunshine and wintry showers, hail, sleet and snow, a good rash of showers for northern and eastern areas that get blown towards the west on that strong and gusty wind, and that wind is going to make it feel chilly. These are the temperatures on Thursday, particularly cold down the eastern side of the UK, 6-7 degrees, that sort of order. When you add on the strength of the wind, it'll feel more like 2 or 3. Quite a shock to the system. Maybe only short-lived though, because things start to quieten down a bit by Friday. That area of high pressure trying to come in. The winds will be lighter on Friday, but we start with a frost, maybe some icy patches. There's some sunshine, a few wintry showers, not quite as many on Friday, but it does cloud over in Scotland with some rain, sleet and snow over the hills. Won't be as cold on Friday, temperatures about 8 or 9 degrees, and it won't be quite as cold over the weekend either. Jane.
Thank you, Darren Bett. Thanks. And that is all from the News at 1 team for today. On BBC One, we'll join the BBC's news teams wherever you are. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.